Picture a hillside in Spain, autumn wind, and one man standing next to what looks, honestly, like a pool noodle on a stick. No blades spinning, no motors humming, no panels catching the sun, just a slender white cylinder, barely taller than a person, swaying slightly in the breeze. And at the bottom of that stick, wired to a small box the size of a shoebox, electricity is flowing. Enough to power a farmhouse. Enough that the local utility company sent 2 technicians out to check the meter. They looked at the readings. They looked at the stick. And they walked away without saying a single word. Because what they saw threatened something worth billions of dollars. And today, I'm going to show you exactly what it was. If you have been watching your electricity bill climb every single year and wondering whether there is actually anything you can do about it, something real, something that doesn't cost $40,000 in solar panels or involve a contractor with a 3-week backlog, then what I'm about to share with you is worth every minute of your time. Because the solution we're talking about today doesn't come from Silicon Valley. It doesn't come from a government subsidy program. It comes from a principle that physicists have understood since 1911 and engineers have been actively avoiding for 90 years. The U.S. Energy Information Administration tracks residential electricity prices across the country. In 2018, the average American household paid about 12.8 cents per kilowatt hour. By 2024, that number had climbed to 16.3 cents. That's a 27% increase in 6 years. Inflation over the same period was roughly 22%. Electricity is outpacing inflation. In California, the average rate is now over 30 cents per kilowatt hour. In Hawaii, over 41. A household using 900 kilowatt hours a month, which is close to the national average, is now paying around $150 a month just to keep the lights on. $1,800 a year. And rising. Now multiply that over the lifetime of your home. Over 30 years, at current rates, you're looking at somewhere between $54,000 and $70,000 in electricity costs before a single rate increase. That number is uncomfortable, and the industry knows it, which is why when a solution appears that could change it, especially a cheap one, the response from that industry is not excitement. It's silence. November 7, 1940. Tacoma, Washington. A suspension bridge over the Narrows, a bridge engineers had called one of the most elegant structures in America, begins to twist, and sway, and buckle, in a 40-mile-per-hour wind. Within hours, it tears itself apart on camera. The footage still exists. You can watch it today. Every civil engineering student studies that collapse. The cause was something called vortex-induced vibration. As wind moves past a surface, it doesn't flow smoothly around the back. It peels off in rotating eddies, alternating from one side, then the other, in a rhythmic pattern. A physicist named Theodore von Karman described this mathematically in 1911. If the structure resonates with that rhythm, it shakes. And if nothing can dampen that shaking, it eventually tears itself apart. For 90 years, engineers used this knowledge to design things that would not shake. Helical strakes on smokestacks, tapered edges on antennas, aerodynamic profiles on skyscrapers. The vortex was the enemy. Until one team of Spanish engineers asked, what if it wasn't? David Yanes is an aerospace engineer. His co-founder Raul Martin is a structural engineer. Together, in 2012, working out of a village of 212 people in the province of Avila, they asked the question that no one in the wind energy industry wanted answered. Instead of fighting the vortex, what if you tuned a structure to resonate with it and captured that oscillation as electricity? They called their company Vortex Bladeless. Their first working prototype produced 100 watts continuous in a steady 14-mile-per-hour wind. No gearbox, no yaw motor, no bearings, nothing to grease, nothing to replace, nothing to fail in an ice storm. The tip of the device traces a figure 8 pattern, about 3 to 4 inches of total deflection. At the base, a stack of neodymium magnets passes through copper coils. That movement becomes alternating current. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge was destroyed by this phenomenon. The Vortex Bladeless device is powered by it. They named their residential unit the Vortex Tacoma. Dark humor, but also a point. Let me be precise here, because I want you to understand the physics before we talk about what it costs. When wind passes a vertical cylinder, it creates what's called a Kármán vortex street. Little spinning eddies that peel off one side of the cylinder, then the other, in a repeating rhythm. If the cylinder is rigid, those eddies create fatigue over time. That's why every steel smokestack in the country has spiral strakes welded onto it. The strakes break up the vortex pattern before it can build momentum. But if the cylinder is flexible at the base, and tuned so its natural frequency matches the vortex shedding frequency at common local wind speeds, the cylinder doesn't resist. It resonates. It oscillates in that same rhythm. And the oscillation generates electricity. There are no blades rotating. There is no rotor spinning. There are no moving parts in the conventional sense. Just a carbon fiber rod, a flexible polymer base, a stack of neodymium magnets, and copper coils. That's the whole machine. Now let me introduce you to someone who has never read a physics paper in his life, and who built one of these devices from scratch for $78. Eli Stoltzfus is an old order Amish carpenter in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. He read about vortex-induced vibration in a Homesteader pamphlet passed around his community. Within a weekend, he had built his own unit from materials he sourced locally. A 6-foot fiberglass driveway marker, a stack of magnets pulled from a broken microwave, copper wire from a rewound transformer, and a flexible silicone boot from a tractor supply store, $11. He mounted it to the ridge cap of his dairy barn. In Lancaster County, wind speeds above 9 miles per hour occur roughly 73% of the year, according to data from Lancaster Airport. His unit produces between 60 and 110 watts during those hours. That's enough to run his cold storage compressor, his LED workshop lights, and a small battery bank for the lanterns his family carries between buildings after dark. He has not paid PPL Electric, the local utility, for those circuits in over 4 years. When I sat on his porch while 2 of his daughters shelled peas into a galvanized bucket, he told me something that has stayed with me. He said the English world is always looking for the machine with the most parts. The Amish look for the machine with the fewest. Let me show you something. The Vortex Tacoma, the commercial version of this device, is rated at 100 watts peak. It stands about 2.5 feet tall, weighs around 33 pounds. If you build one yourself from off-the-shelf components, the bill of materials comes to between $85 and $95. Here's the breakdown. Carbon fiber rod, 6 feet, around $22 from a Kite Supply website. 40 neodymium N52 magnets, half-inch diameter, about $18. 28-gauge enameled copper wire, half a pound, $14. Flexible polyurethane base coupler, $11. Bridge rectifier and charge controller, $5. Mounting hardware and junction box, $15 to $20. That's it. You're at $85 to $95 depending on where you source. One unit producing an average of 60 watts continuous gives you about 1.5 kilowatt hours per day. The average American household uses about 30 kilowatt hours per day. So one unit covers about 5% of your consumption. But here is where the math becomes interesting. 6 units along a roof ridge, under $600. That's 30% of household consumption offset. Add 2 or 3 modest solar panels for around $800, and you're looking at 60 to 70% self-generation. Total system cost, under $2,000. Payback period at current electricity rates, under 3 years. Over the projected 36-year service life of the device, a system that offsets a third of your consumption saves you more than $20,000 at today's rates. Before rate increases. The math is not subtle. I know the next question. How long does it actually last? The Oak Ridge National Laboratory ran independent fatigue testing on a resonant generator design similar to this one in 2019. Their projection was a structural service life of roughly 36 years under continuous oscillation. That's about double the rated lifespan of a residential 3-bladed turbine and triple the warranted lifespan of a typical rooftop solar panel. The Polytechnic University of Madrid tested carbon fiber rods under the kind of stress this device creates. Aerospace-grade extruded carbon fiber can withstand approximately 240 million flex cycles before measurable degradation. At a resonant frequency of 3 to 4 Hz over a 6-hour productive wind day, that projects to roughly 75 years of operational life. The neodymium magnets sealed in epoxy at the base lose about 1% of their field strength per decade. After 40 years, the output drops marginally. The only component you'll replace is the rubber bushing at the base. The flexural pivot. Cost, about $4 to $11. Replacement interval, every 3 to 15 years, depending on whose estimate you use. There is no other machine in residential energy with that maintenance profile. So why haven't you heard about this? The story isn't a conspiracy in the dramatic sense. It's quieter than that, and more durable. In 1992, the Energy Policy Act created the production tax credit for wind energy. Originally 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour for utility-scale projects. That credit was renewed and expanded 11 times between 1999 and 2020. Each expansion was shaped by the American Wind Energy Association, now merged into a larger body called American Clean Power, whose board includes representatives from General Electric, Siemens, Vestas, NextEra, and others. These are companies that build three-bladed turbines the size of football fields. Their business model depends entirely on the framing of wind energy as a utility-scale infrastructure investment, not a homeowner-scale appliance. When the Department of Energy published a technical brief in 2018 acknowledging that bladeless vortex-induced vibration generators showed, in their words, significant promise for distributed residential generation at price points unreachable by conventional turbines, that brief was cited twice in the literature. Then it stopped being referenced in DOE residential wind guidance entirely. Vortex Bladeless applied for U.S. research partnership funding in 2015 and again in 2017. Declined both times. The official reason was that the technology was at too low a readiness level. That same year, the DOE awarded $13 million to a consortium developing improved blade pitch control algorithms for utility-scale turbines. A $90 stick on your roof does not fit that financial model. It destroys it. This isn't the first time this has happened. In 1937, the U.S. Department of Agriculture published Farmers Bulletin No. 1789, Wind Electric Power for the Farm. It described in detail how to build and maintain small wind generators for rural homesteads. It was distributed free of charge to over 200,000 farms through the county extension system. By 1946, after the Rural Electrification Administration had completed grid extension to roughly 70% of American farms, that bulletin was quietly removed from the USDA's recommended reading list. Never formally retracted. Simply allowed to fall out of print. The knowledge of how a farmer could power his own homestead, with his own hands, from materials he could source locally, didn't disappear. It just became inconvenient. Around the same time, a South Dakota inventor named Marcellus Jacobs built more than 30,000 small wind turbines between 1925 and 1956. His machines were engineered to last 50 years. Many of them lasted 90. They still spin today on Montana ranches and Alaskan fishing camps. They didn't become obsolete because something better came along. They became obsolete because copper wire arrived in American yards on government-subsidized poles. Rendered irrelevant by accounting, not by entropy. David Yanes stepped into that same current when he filed his first Vortex bladeless patent in 2014. He wasn't inventing something new. He was recovering something the global energy economy had spent 80 years burying. Let me deal with the objections I hear most often. First, humidity and weather. A properly sealed vortex unit uses a fully encapsulated alternator section potted in epoxy resin with a single small breathing membrane. Eli's homemade version has been through 4 Pennsylvania winters, including the polar vortex event of February 2021, when temperatures hit -15 Fahrenheit. The coil resistance hasn't changed measurably. Second, does this work in my climate? It depends on average wind speed at about 10 meters above ground. NOAA's wind resource maps, freely available at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory website, show that roughly 78% of the continental United States has sustained average wind speeds above 8 miles per hour at residential rooftop height. That includes most of the Great Plains, the entire Atlantic seaboard from Virginia north, the Texas Gulf Coast, the California Central Valley, and substantial portions of the desert Southwest, where thermal updrafts create reliable afternoon wind. The zones where it doesn't work well: deep southeast forests where tree canopy drops surface wind below useful thresholds, and certain valley pockets in the Appalachians. For everyone else, a device on a ridge cap or a simple 10-foot mast produces. Third, the cost seems too low. See the itemized list I gave you earlier. It's $85 to $95. That is the actual bill of materials, not a promotional estimate. Fourth, can it run a whole house? Not with one unit. You'd need 18 to 32 units to replace a full American household's electricity consumption, depending on your location and wind atlas. That brings materials cost into the $2,000 to $3,000 range. Still less than 10% of a comparable solar installation, with no roof penetration, no south-facing requirement, and in most rural counties, no permit. Here's what Eli Stoltzfus actually runs. 11 Vortex units mounted in a staggered pattern along his eastern fence line. 6 salvaged lead-acid deep-cycle batteries from a forklift dealership in Reading. A bank of cedar-lined wooden boxes to absorb any hydrogen gas from the charging process. Total system cost, just over $1,300, paid in pieces over 2 years. That system runs a bandsaw, a drill press, and a dust collection blower in his woodworking shop through any working day with wind above about 7 miles per hour. His household electrical consumption by Amish standards is essentially zero on top of that. 3 Vortex units on the barn ridge. 2 small solar panels on the south face of his workshop. 6 golf cart batteries. Total investment across everything, roughly $1,200 over 2 years. It now covers about 80% of his electrical needs. The grid wire that used to run from the pole to his barn is still there. It's just not connected to anything. PPL Electric still sends a meter reader once a year out of habit. The reader walks up, looks at the disconnected service entrance, shrugs, and walks back to his truck. There's a pattern here worth naming. The most resilient communities in North America over the last 2 decades, the Old Order Amish, the Old Order Mennonites, have not gone dark in any of the major grid failures since 2000. Not the Northeast blackout of 2003. Not Hurricane Sandy. Not the Texas freeze of February 2021, when 4 million customers lost power and at least 246 people died. These are not communities that reject technology. They use solar panels. They use batteries. They use vortex generators. What they reject is dependence. There's a difference between using electricity and being owned by the grid. The Amish draw that line deliberately. Most of us never had the chance to draw it at all. Distribution monopolies don't die from competition. They die from irrelevance. It happened to recorded music between 1999 and 2008. It's happening to cable television now. And the slow, quiet decentralization of electricity generation is the next version of that same shift. A household that generates its own $90 of electricity per month has partially exited the regulated economy. Multiply that by 40 million households, and the rate base on which American utilities calculate their guaranteed returns begins to erode. This is not speculation. This is arithmetic. There's a retired electrician in Vermont named Calvin Burrows. He's 73 years old. He watched one instructional video about vortex generators in March 2023, downloaded a printed PDF that a friend mailed him from Burlington, and started building in his garage. He has now built 97 units, given 70 of them away to neighbors, and powers his entire heated workshop from the remaining 27, mounted along his property line. He doesn't have a smartphone. He learned the whole process from paper. David Yanes and Eli Stoltzfus have never met. One holds a doctorate in aerospace engineering. The other finished school at 8th grade. They arrived at the same machine from opposite ends of human civilization. It works because the physics works. And the physics hasn't changed since Theodore von Kármán wrote his equations in 1911. Wind moves. The stick shakes. The magnets pass the coils. Electricity flows. That's the whole story. Before the next storm system rolls through your area, go to the highest point of your property. Hold a piece of ribbon on a stick. Watch how often it moves. If that ribbon flutters for more than half of any given afternoon, you have a wind resource. You have everything you need to start. The full materials list is under $90. The afternoon is yours. The assumption that energy must come from somewhere far away, owned by someone else, billed monthly, and metered to the 10th of a kilowatt hour, that assumption was manufactured. It was not handed down from physics. It was handed down from a financial architecture built over a century to make it feel inevitable. It isn't. If this changed how you're thinking about your energy bill, hit the like button. It helps more people find this. Subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of research. I cover energy efficiency, home engineering, and the tools that actually work, not the ones that get the most marketing budget. And the next video is going to get into something most people completely overlook. Why your ceiling is costing you more than your roof, and what a $12 fix actually does to your cooling bill in the summer. You'll want to see it. I'll see you there.